Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Southard and I chose to do Parkinson's disease. So first let's talk about what Parkinson's disease is. So the definition is Parkinson's disease is a progressive nervous system disorder that affects movement. So this mainly affects, the muscles in the body. Signs and symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So first, symptoms start on, one half of the body. So let's say they were not diagnosed. They started having symptoms on the right-hand side of the body. The right-hand side will always be worse than the left-hand side with these symptoms. So some symptoms are tremors in the hand, so, shaking of the hand like this, an expressionless face, so it's like wearing a mask, and what I mean by that is they're always going to have the same face on because it is hard for them to move their face muscles, so it'll be like this, for most of the time. They're going to have rigid muscles, so it's going to be really hard to walk, and like I said, it's really hard to move the muscles in their face. They're going to have slurred or slow speech, so this again relates to, moving the muscles into space, or moving the muscles in their face, and then slow speech because it's hard for them to think of certain words, like how we process words. It's really hard for them to think about it. They're going to have a loss of automatic movements, so some examples is blinking or swallowing or keeping their mouth closed, just simple things like that. It really affects that part of their brain. And then writing changes. So I have an example right here. Sample A is, so this is a person that was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and sample A is when they were first diagnosed. You can see, the handwriting's nice, and then sample B is as their symptoms got worse, their handwriting got worse with it. Talk about the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. So there are no specific tests for Parkinson's disease, so you can't just go in and get a CT scan and they'll say, oh, you have Parkinson's. Like it doesn't happen like that. But the main two things that doctors use to diagnose Parkinson's disease is the symptoms and the neurological exam that they will give you. And then another way is they will prescribe a small dose of Parkinson's medication. For example, carbidopa levodopa. They'll diagnose that, they'll prescribe you that. And if your symptoms get better, like significantly better, then they will ultimately diagnose you with Parkinson's disease. But since this is the case, it takes a lot of time to diagnose Parkinson's disease. Symptoms have to be, really bad and really present in order for them to say that you do have Parkinson's disease. About some causes of Parkinson's disease. So it is, or certain nerve cells in the brain break down or die over time, which increases the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. The cause is actually unknown, but researchers have found that genes can sometimes play a role, meaning that if a lot of people in your family do have Parkinson's disease, it is more than likely that the next person will get Parkinson's disease, but it still is a really small risk and it's not really the cause. And then there's environmental triggers like breathing in toxins can actually heighten the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, but still is, relatively small because there is no cause. And then we'll talk about treatments. So it is an uncurable disease in the moment, but there is medication that can help, dial down the symptoms. So what the medication really does is there's a chemical of dopamine that transfers a message throughout your body, and that's what people with Parkinson's disease lack. So they'll diagnose dopamine agonist, or like I said, carbidopa levodopa. And then they'll also give you lifestyle changes. They'll have you do aerobic exercise to help, balancing and stretching out your muscles, and physical therapy, which ultimately, does the same thing. The prevalence of Parkinson's, age, it mainly affects the 60 or older community. Young adults rarely see Parkinson's disease because it usually comes on middle to late life. Hereditary, like I said, it is, prevalent if people in your close family have Parkinson's disease and if many people in your family have Parkinson's disease, but it's still not, 100%. Sex and gender, men are more likely to develop Parkinson's disease. And then exposure to toxins like pesticides, which, control pests, and herbicides, which is ultimately a weed killer. So, breathing this in can, bring on symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Some common associations, all of these diseases are, considered in the initial diagnosis. So, obviously we have Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, because those people can get, the tremors and the nerves in their brain do break down. Primary lateral sclerosis, which is also a breakdown of the nerves in the brain. An essential tremor, which is, just a normal tremor in the hands. And a dystonic tremor, which is actually paired with dystonia, which is basically where the brain sends incorrect messages throughout the body. And so it makes the muscles overactive. And so, it brings on that tremor and those rigid muscles. There are 4 primary motor symptoms of Parkinson's. So there's the tremor, the rigidity muscles, the bradykinesia, which is slow movement because their muscles are, hard to move. They do ultimately walk pretty slower. And postular instability, so they have balance problems. So that's why the physical therapy will really help, fix or help those balance problems because, those muscles are super hard to move. And then we have cognitive characteristics, which are attention difficulties, visuospatial dysfunction. And what that means is they have a hard time thinking in more than one dimension. So, they can't think of things in 2D or 3D, or they just have a hard time doing that. And then this is also needed in distance perception. So, when walking or driving, they have a hard time, seeing how far a building is or seeing how far a person is. So, this could ultimately be dangerous. They have slowed thinking and they have difficulty speaking. So they have a really hard time thinking of certain words. So, for example, let's say they went to the store the other day and they're trying to tell you about how they went to the store, but they can't remember, the word store, or it just takes them a while to think of that, which brings us to our next thing, where they have difficulty remembering and learning things. And then next we have behavioral characteristics. So they have anxiety because they have fear of how their life will change with Parkinson's disease because it will change. And they have fear of how they will function with the impairments. So, like I said, it's a hard time walking. So if they like to dance, they're going to have a really hard time doing that. This will be paired with depression. So they have the depression because they're not able to enjoy what they, used to enjoy. They'll have personality changes. So an example that I have here is a previously easygoing person can change into a stubborn person, or a usually happy person can change into a really angry person. And then they'll have impulse behaviors. So they'll start hoarding things like, things that they think have sentimental value but really have none at all and should be thrown away. Or they'll do excessive eating and drinking. And then some people actually experience hallucinations. They can be mild to severe, and they can either be really pleasant or really dark. So some examples that I saw of this, of pleasant ones, were, children running around or flowers all around them. And then some examples of dark ones that I read about where, they'll see like a huge bug crawling on the floor, or they'll see a figure passing through their peripheral vision and, thinking that someone is actually there. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some interesting facts of Parkinson's disease. So people with Parkinson's can actually live a good quality life. Medication does help with the depression and the anxiety and, dimming down the symptoms. And then once symptoms are lessened, obviously people usually end up happier because they, really don't have to think about all that stuff. No two people have the same exact symptoms. So, progression of symptoms differs from one person to another. So, one person could have severe Parkinson's disease and someone else could just, have the tremors or, have the rigid muscles, not everything. Um, Small handwriting and loss of smell are early signs. And something interesting that I found about that is people with Parkinson's disease cannot smell bananas, dill pickles, or licorice. So they completely lose the smell of that. And then people with Parkinson's disease are not always angry or sad. Since this affects the muscles, like I said, they'll have that expressionless face, but it doesn't always mean that they're, not happy or not enjoying something. They could be happy, and they could be ultimately sad too. It just, you can't really depend on their facial expression anymore. And then lastly, Parkinson's should be treated with a team approach. So there should be supportive doctors, supportive family members, supportive friends, that can all help. And there are actually a lot of communities with Parkinson's disease that they can go in and, talk to people and relate to people and hopefully find someone that could help them, get through this disease. But that is all for my presentation. Last thing is just my sources. But thank you so much, and don't forget to put your questions down below. And yeah, thank you.